Greetings gamers, Tim here again, and today is August 24th, 2015, and that is day 24 of RPGADAY. And this kicker is, what is your favorite house rule? And that's kind of interesting because for the most part, I don't use house rules. I have in the past, but I fully believe in finding the right game for what I'm doing. And if that's the case, generally speaking, I don't need to make house rules, because house rules are there's something wrong with the game I'm using, or it doesn't quite do it exactly how I'm interested in seeing it done. I think probably my favorite house rule is for the Marvel Superheroes role-playing game, FASERIP, which is the perfect game for me, which I covered in the past video. And that is a minor fix that allows you to get past armor, because armor is pretty much an all or nothing kind of thing, as in if you have it and you have it high enough, you're only, you subtract it from all damage, and if somebody doesn't have an attack that can do more damage than your defense, your body armor, it's not going to get through. And I do have a slight house rule I've used a couple times. I don't use it often. It's just in cases where I plan on using body armor a lot with foes that I might allow it for players to make use of and villains to make use of. But most of the time it's a misunderstanding of how the body armor works, number one, because body armor only protects at rank value for physical attacks. Energy attacks, it subtracts, I think, 20 points. So an energy attack is always going to be more effective against somebody in body armor than a physical one. And the inverse is true for force fields. An energy attack is less effective against force fields than a physical attack. Now, that being said, when I use the house rule, what I basically do is make it so that if you roll a red result, you still inflict a minor amount of damage, even if you're just close to that high-end rank. Like if somebody has incredible body armor and you have a remarkable attack, if you roll a red result, I allow the person to do a few points of damage. Not much, but enough so that they can trigger things like knockback, slams, and stuns, and that kind of thing. Usually it depends on how far it is, because I'm not going to allow somebody with a good rank ability to puncture incredible armor. I'm just not going to do it because there's too many differences. It still has to be within one rank, which basically means it's follows one of the rules in the game, where if something is 2 ranks higher, I think it's an impossible feat to perform. So, and something that is 1 rank below can still affect something 1 rank above on a red result. And it's basically using a rule that's already there, but tweaking it slightly. Now, again, I personally am of the opinion that when you are playing a superhero game like that if you can't damage the opponent you're fighting, you change the rules on the opponent you're fighting. You knock them into, or trick them into a situation that slows them, stops them, or distracts them from their goals. As long as you do that, I prefer to use that rather than house rules. But I do have some people who do not try and think around the problem, and I've played with them in the past, that all they will do is try and hammer and hammer and hammer and hammer. And to be honest, I think not using the rule is better with those people, because it forces them to have to consider to get around or suffer a defeat. But again, that's probably my favorite house rule for my very limited uses of house rules. Occasionally they pop up from time to time, and sometimes I make changes to a game after reading it, before I've played it, and then I realize after I've played it that I didn't need to make that change anyway. I know that we have a house rule in our Deadlands game about damaging people, because we would have people taken out, or bad guys taken out, really easily when we ace, because oftentimes when we ace, 1 or more characters, because we've got a fairly decent sized group, will ace significantly, and will do enough damage to fundamentally take somebody out quickly. And so we've kind of increased the effectiveness of their toughness after the first bonus. But again, it's not my favorite house rule. It's just a house rule that's used with one of the groups I play with. I have a friend who also house rules my Hearts and Souls game system that I wrote to run it for various anime-themed games, because it's a superhero game, and he adjusts it power level-wise, scaling or adjusting the scaling so that things that would be in a superhero game, superhuman or cosmic, are not quite that far up the scale. He uses a tighter scale, so that something that uses a D10 or a D12 in Hearts and Souls is not, way up there. It's still within human parameters, and that's his house rule. So again, house rules are used from time to time in my gaming groups, but I'm not big on them myself, unless, like if I'm trying to adjust to fit a particular setting, sometimes I might use them, but really that's all I have to say, because it's not something that comes up really often. I like using games as they're written, unless there's a serious flaw. And sometimes you have to fix those flaws. Sometimes you have to fix those flaws because reading it, you realize that the superpower doesn't work as intended. For example, I wrote up a correction to the aberrant power clone back when aberrant came out, because the aberrant power of clone makes somebody, originally you create a duplicate of yourself, but based on the way it worked, they said you suffer minus penalties. They have a lower dice stat-wise, which means you effectively have made, according to the power, an exact duplicate who is uglier, weaker, and stupider than your character, or more stupid. I'm sorry, I should use more stupid rather than stupider. But, slang gets in there sometimes, which is kind of amusing when they're supposed to be an identical duplicate. And I wrote up a quick fix a long time ago that still limited the power, but pretty much it did create an exact duplicate with a slight variance that was necessary for power balance, which was, back in the day, it was you create a clone, its stats and skill, all that is identical to you, but it uses your quantum pool. It fundamentally uses your energy. It doesn't have energy of its own, which makes sense. It's drawing from your superpower, so why not make it actually draw from your superpower? But that's kind of the house rules thing. From time to time, yeah, I'll look for house rules, but still, that's only when there's something egregiously wrong, or I want to try something different. So, I've made a longer video on this than I have on some other things, because I had to discuss house rules and why house rules are used, etc., etc. So I'm going to cut it here. Peace and good gaming. Take care. Enjoy. Have a great day.